Good afternoon. I have a little bit of a different format for you today. We're showing up 1 minute late, and I'm also showing up with a masked brewer, and you're going to learn a little bit more about that in a minute. So, I am Helen Harwood Snell, expert storyteller, certified communication coach, and I have this curiosity that I just love learning about people. And I decided to turn that into a career where what I learn about them helps them build their story and build their brand. So if you're struggling with confidence in your message or figuring out how to stand out in the crowd, storytelling might be the thing for you. So each week I introduce a new guest. We learn a little bit about their business, their personality, and then I ask them to share a story with me that I help turn into a business story that they could use for their business. So the reason that we have a masked guest today, if you guys watch any, I don't even know what channel it's on, The Masked Singer on TV, we have a masked podcaster today, and that's because my technical skills made me fall off my normal routine, and I didn't get all of my advertising out ahead of time, but the wonderful Wayne Pratt is joining us live anyways. Welcome, Wayne. And he is going to entertain. So, Wayne is a speaker, author, and life coach who's been helping people achieve their dreams for over 20 years before it was even called coaching. So, we're going to talk about that a little bit. He lives near Kingston, Ontario. He is happily married to his amazing wife, Elizabeth, and proud father to Bethany. And he has declined one of my invitations to him recently because it's his wedding anniversary. So, Elizabeth, you must be a good woman. So, Wayne, tell me a little bit about who you are. Like, you are a fun guy. I know that from seeing you at networking events and things. Tell me who you are outside of your work. What makes Wayne Pratt tick?
Well, it's funny. I have always been the jokester. But the other thing that's weird is, okay, Wayne, why aren't you in stand up? And the thing is, people fail in stand up, and that the rejection is terrible. So I learned a lot about corporate. My family were in business, so I learned everything I could about business. And this story actually, I've always been the guy who could turn a phrase. And now occasionally it also involved charges, but we got most of them dropped.
Most of them. Okay, well,
Most
that's
of them,
important.
sure. But the other thing that is neat is where this turned into a career is I actually worked for a chartered accountant. And now that's where he said, Wayne, you an accountant? That's just wrong. But
Yeah.
but but the neat thing is my boss hated customers. So my job was to actually babysit them to get their books, and then I was the one that they thought I was their accountant, and I never touched their books. But
Oh, that's so funny.
I grew with them, I shared with them, I listened to them, and I became very good at this. As I said, I was coaching before it was even called coaching.
So you were a good listener.
Yes.
And in that listening, did you also start to uncover things in that career that people needed more than bookkeeping?
Yes. That was the whole point. 20 years ago, when this was, the bookkeeping was much slower, and you handed your box, your shoe box, to your guy a year late, and then he turned it into something, and it was never meaningful because the data was dead.
Yeah.
And then my job was to actually plan a bit with them and tell them about hopes and dreams. Now this is funny. When I left after I got in chartered accounting, I then got into banking, the other dull career. And anyway, the joke was when they asked me to retire. Now there was a handgun and one bullet. That could have been a coincidence. I don't know. When I did leave, I got all kinds of you should be in coaching. You should be in coaching. You should be in coaching. And I was actually took a course and it was great. And I didn't know that I didn't know why coaching worked. It wasn't to offer my incredible scintillating advice. It was to pull out from them. They had the answers. My job was
Yes.
just to listen and to ask the questions that were meaningful. And that's why coaching got fun.
That's awesome. And I love how what was one of the phrases? you offer coaching for Main Street, not Wall Street.
Yes.
And I think that's such a huge differentiator for people, because often when we go into business, if we've left corporate, we still try to work that same way, right? We try to still have that same mindset. Or even if we're watching, I was talking earlier today, I don't even remember where I was having the conversation, but somebody was mentioning, big people on social media, and how, it looks so easy the way they show up. So somebody like, Tony Robbins or somebody like that, that's actually corporate, right? Like he's a corporate business. He's not a Main Street small time business. And so that's such a huge differentiator in your coaching. So give the audience a couple of indications of how that business operates differently, and how, your coaching style actually helps to groom that kind of business owner.
It's actually a story. What a coincidence. Maybe I should be with Helen. Who knew? But the neat news is, if you go to the hardware store and you talk to the guy who owns the hardware store about coaching, he thinks it's about helping his 9-year-old be better at soccer. Life coaching doesn't even occur to them. It's just not part of their culture. And
Yes.
in the C-suite, the CFO, the CEO, the CMO, the COO, they all know about coaching, but not the guy on the main street. And we created, and the joke is, I also am a podcaster. And one of my guests was in an interview with me. And after the interview, the best part of the interview is after the interview ends, which is tragic, but it's true. And so I was whining about that. People didn't know it was for them, that coaching had tools that were available across the line. And my co-writer, Matt, was the guest, and he agreed with me. And and the joke is, we talked to so many people all over the world, East Trade Winds with Bernie. And so, I mean, Scotland and California and all these places. And this man was from Kingston. So I actually met him at McDonald's while I was getting his windshield changed. And I laid out do you ever care about our, people our size? And he created what is now known as a business fable. That's actually a real thing. And it's, if you've ever heard of Who Moved My Cheese or the 1 Minute Manager, it's telling a story that tells the story. So it involves coach didactic training, which is both useful and deadly dull, and a story that draws them in. So that's his job. He did that. So we imagined two protagonists, me and Matt, going into a coffee shop in some mythical small town and being introduced to each other because we were both coaches. And we decided that we would pitch our new material for the city. Woo! And with a live audience so we could work out the bugs. And then, so we invented people to take the course. One was a banker, and one was a clothier, and one was a electrician, and one was a the guy that ran the shop. So really, work-life places. And we showed them how they could learn these things and get something out of it. It wasn't going to be over their head, and no one was going to be talked down to or yelled at.
Awesome.
And that's why Freshly Brewed Coaching was about getting the coaching in the coffee shop.
Okay. And so, just for curiosity, do you offer coaching in coffee shops?
It's funny. This book's only been out a month, and my partner wants to. I think it's silly, but it will probably have to, because now it's a brand. But ironically enough, anytime you have a dozen people that are actually listening to you, I can't help myself. I start coaching. One thing I did learn, if you're going to write a book with a co-author, make sure it's a guy who can type. I think that's one thing Matt brought. He's not only a great coach, he also typed it.
You definitely know how to team up with people who have the skills that you don't have. So we're going to talk more about that. But I want to talk about a little bit more about Freshly Brewed Coaching. So that is the
Yes.
name of your coaching business,
That is
as
the name of
well
my book.
as.
We're still,
Okay.
that is the name of the book. Now, the neat thing about the book is if you buy the book, you get the coaching. Like you actually work through, it's a workbook. Like there's both a story and a workbook. And then
Okay.
at the end of the month of the working, if you want to stay in the community, you can, but you actually got legitimate, Tony Robbins coaching in the $30 investment.
Amazing. So that is the name of your book. What is the name of your coaching business then, Wayne?
Motivate You.
With the number 8.
With
correct?
the number 8, yes.
Motivate You. Okay.
Yes.
All right. I'm glad that we cleared that up because I thought Freshly Brewed Coaching was also the name of your coaching business. So I'm glad we got
It would
that.
not be impossible if that's how it morphed, but it
Yes.
wasn't a month ago. Let's put it that way.
Well, you know what I think would be super fun with that book is to have kind of like a book launch or a workshop with your book in a coffee shop. Like I think that would be super fun.
It will probably happen.
Yeah, there's a
Yes.
great shop here in Smiths Falls where I live.
Called?
Let me know if it's called Lighthouse Cafe.
Done. You set it up. Tell them they got to buy 6 books and we're there.
I think that would be a really fun idea. Okay, I'm going to make a note of that. See if we can pull something like that together. That is super fun. So, tell me a little bit more about Matt. How did you develop a relationship with him?
Well, that's the neat part. He just was a guest on our podcast. And he is a high-end corporate coach, and he's good, and he's thoughtful, and he's dry, and he is the other bookend of me. Like he's Mr. Corporate, and so it was really neat. But when we got talking, after about 40 minutes of me being me, sort of Robin Williams, if he was a life coach, he says, we got to do this. And then we sat down in one of these workshops, where you rent a desk for 13 Wednesdays and wrote a book.
Oh, that's so fun.
He had 2 jobs. 1, typing, and 2, keeping me from bothering the other people and the other carols. That was the other problem. He kept having to rein me back in.
I kind of feel like you're that, like you said, the jokester kind of high school student that never grew up, Wayne, which is so fun. Like you just make me laugh every time we talk. That is so good.
There's actually something else here that's kind of neat. Many people have wondered if I was not the leprechaun, the court jester. And there's a neat thing about the court jester. You know the powerful thing about the court jester? He was the only one who could
all the attention in the room.
Yeah, that's true. But he was the only one that could tell the king the truth. Anyone else would get shot. But the court jester got away with it. So that's how this got framed. And yes, there have been some spectacular apologies. I didn't know she was your aunt, really. But that's another story.
I think there's also some stories where there's some court jesters who also got executed by the king because they didn't necessarily like their humor. But that's a kind of a great way to really how do I want to say this, encapsulate your brand. Yes. I think is building business through humor, because it's hard to hear things about our business that we don't want to hear. If you're doing your books a year behind and then you have no ability to forecast and things like that, sometimes it's tough to hear those things. And if it can be told to you in a way that is conversational over coffee, just feels like you're talking with a good friend, that's a really great way for, pardon me, for a smaller business owner who's not used to that corporate jargon to actually see what's happening in their business, right? With a little bit of humor.
On my podcast, which is called Knack for Business, which you know of. But
Yes.
the neat thing is I won't let anyone away with a 3-letter acronym, which is known as a TLA, which is funny because a TLA is in fact a TLA. And so I make them explain it so they're not just in their own little jargon.
Yes.
So yeah, which is kind
Yeah.
of fun.
No, that's very good. So outside of your business, I want to
Yeah.
know a little bit more about Wayne. You've
Yes,
got this sense of humor, you're a court jester. Tell me what other things, like what are some life goals, dreams, bucket list things for you?
that's great. First, there's one story I got to tell you. The one thing that confuses people is when I am both in I have some really funny, interesting point that makes them laugh, and then I drop some incredible, thoughtful business skill on them, and they're
Yep.
expecting a rim shot. One actually person said I had to go around with one of those ba ba so they would know what was coming next. So actually, I have a man in England who wants to write a book with me. And if it works, I'm going to be on the roller coaster, that big roller coaster that you see in the pictures. I want
Ferris
to
wheel.
be, yes, I want to be on that Ferris wheel on my birthday, which is August 28th next year because of the book launch.
All right. And is your book title going to have something to do with the Ferris wheel?
Maybe it should. But I will tell you one thing that is kind of neat. Many people discuss financial goals. It's all about finance, finance, finance. And I can honestly say, through frugality and careful planning, I have enough money to live for the rest of my life, providing I die by 6 p.m.
I was just going to write that down. And then we got the ba-dum-bum. Oh my goodness, that's so good. So tell me, who is a hero of yours?
I have two, well, three maybe. Jimmy Buffett. He is a man who both was a brilliant businessman and incredibly fun and could make it work. And that's very, very rare.
Very
Second,
true.
has to be Robin Williams. Robin Williams, the guy was amazing. And yeah, I also should tell you, one of my heroes is Elizabeth McDonald Pratt, because next week is 39 years, and that requires some skill.
It does. It does. She needs a trophy. That's for sure. So, in working with small business,
Yes.
tell me some of the core values in your life that kind of leak into your business. What are some core values you have?
One is not every day has to be, a party. There is this belief, it's got to be live your passion and whatever. And in a theme, that's good. But on a day-to-day basis, it's unlikely. We're actually misleading people. So you should be
Yes.
striving that way, but don't pretend every day is a circus unless your name's Barnum. The second thing is, I like to ask in every intake interview, if you had to work 20 hours a week on some weird lottery or inheritance where you had 200 grand a year, but you still had to put in these 20 hours doing something, what would you do? And invariably that tells you what they should be doing or striving toward.
Yes. You know what? I'm trying to remember his name now because I don't follow him anymore. It might have been Grant Cardone. I was
Yes.
following him on social media. And probably about, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, he kind of made this disclaimer that if you're working in your area of passion, you're not going to make money. And I was like, I don't want to follow you anymore, because if you're not working in your area of passion, what are you doing? Like, why would you want to be miserable and rich?
Actually, the one thing that's neat is I spent my first 20 years in a small Eastern Ontario town, which I'll remain nameless for this moment, where I was Wayne Jr. Wayne Jr. So I actually had to spend a lot of time and a lot of drama finding who I was that
Mm,
wasn't just Wayne Sr.'s son. And that's
yes.
another story for another time.
That's important though, right? Because I think we all do need to, um, one of the things that I do help people with in their story is actually owning who they are. And so
Yes.
whether you have been a junior in life or even a junior in business, if you're moving out of corporate and you have this imposter syndrome or whatever it might be, you are not going to succeed in your business if you can't stand up and be yourself. And so that's a really important journey to be able to take people on, and I'm sure that you are super helpful in getting them to that place. So tell us where we can find your book, Freshly Brewed Coaching.
Actually, freshlybrewedcoaching.com is the best, or Amazon if you're playing around. Both will do that. But Freshly Brewed Coaching gets you to our website, which takes you to Amazon. And actually, yeah, that'll do it. But freshlybrewedcoaching.com.
Very good. And so in this book, you're going to get, like you said, these real life scenarios of people that you made up in your coffee shop.
Yep.
So you're going to have kind of like case studies, real circumstances, and then there's going to be like questions for you. So it's a workbook you get to work through. And you mentioned a community. So is that a Facebook community? How does that work?
It is going to eventually be through some very witchcraft go high level product, but it will be a Facebook community. It'll be a Facebook community, or the Facebook community will get you to it.
Yes. Okay. There we go. So again, some technical wizardry that is not of you is going to make that happen.
Correct.
And on that note, I do want to share with the listeners other collaborations that you have. So you've got this great book out with Matt. And what is Matt's last name?
Hawksley, like the
Okay,
bird.
very good.
Yep.
Okay, so we've got this great partnership with him in this book, and then you also have a great partnership with Bernie Friendsgate.
Franz
Hope I
Grove.
was
Franz Grove.
Friends
Franz Grove.
Friends Grote. There we
Yep.
go. I knew I was saying that wrong. You run the Knack for Business podcast with him, and also East Trade Winds.
Yes.
So do you want to talk a little bit about what those things are that you offer as well?
Yes. Well, East Trade Winds is kind of bizarre. It started out, now, how could it not be bizarre with me in it?
I was just thinking that.
it started, the whole concept was we were involved in a network community out of the West, out of Vancouver.
Okay.
And they believe that only Pacific time matters. So their breakfast meeting happened at 3 p.m. So we designed something for the East Standard Time.
That's so fun. Okay.
So we started East Trade Winds, and then we're not involved really in that community in the West anymore. And Bernie has the wildest database of people I have ever met. I have actually met one CA who writes Westerns in Africa. We've had cooks from Italy. We've had people from Switzerland. It's just weird. And they get together every Tuesday morning, Eastern Standard Time at 8 a.m. And just, there's an infomercial, usually one speaker. And our mutual friend, Carl, is one of the speakers often. But it's weird because it doesn't fit the mold of any networking you've ever been in ever.
I would agree because I've attended.
Yes.
Yes, and I had no idea where the concept of East Trade Winds came from, so I love that story.
Yes.
Because it can be difficult when you're trying to work across different time zones, how to fit things in. And I know I run a networking group online on Mondays at noon, and we have people that show up at 8 a.m. Their time, and so it's a breakfast meeting for them. It's a lunch meeting for me. It's 3 o'clock in the afternoon for somebody else. So you never know how that's going to go. So people can find your book at freshlybrewedcoaching.com.
Yep, or Amazon.
or Amazon. And can they also connect with you for coaching services through that same website, Wayne?
Actually, the best way is my name, waynepratt.ca.
There you
Very
go.
simple,
Okay.
very clean. And yeah.
Okay, that's awesome. So I always like to end off these calls with showing the audience how we can take all these different elements of your business, your personality, your sense of humor, all of these things, and how can we use that to actually share a story that's going to show someone a little bit more of who you are, how they would want to work with you. Obviously, they've got a pretty good idea from this podcast today if they're listening in, but how could you share a story somewhere in a newsletter, on social media, at a networking event that's going to show people a little bit more of Wayne? So one of the key things is taking a story and connecting it to a value or a lesson or something that's going to align with your business. So I would love if you could share a story for me today that's not a business story, just a Wayne story. And we're going to turn that into a business story that you could use and just show the audience how easy that is to do.
Okay, I will gladly do it. I will start with a joke and then we'll make it a little more personal that I really love. Two people were best friends in high school, and they re-met 20 years later, and they were always, very, very tight. And they asked, "What are you doing now?" And one says, "Well, you always were the star. What happened to you?" And one said, "Well, I've opened 15 businesses and I'm worth about $6 million and it's done very, very well." And the other one said, "Well, what do you do?" He says, "Well, I actually clean up after elephants in a circus." And the guy said, "No, no, no, John, we've got to get you something. You can't be doing that. Come with me." And he says, "What? And leave show business?"
Oh my goodness, that's a good one.
I got to tell you one other story that's kind of neat. I am an extrovert. I think that's fairly
No
clear.
kidding.
Yes. and the neat thing is we had this lockdown, and I'm in a town, like I'm on a cottage near a town of 600 people. So it was rural, and they locked us down. And extroverts don't thrive well. So I actually had to take my daughter's stuffies and line them up on the couch behind me so I had somebody to present to. It was brutal. I couldn't do it. There was nobody to talk to.
Oh, that's funny.
I also have one more thought, and I don't know if this fits, but I really like it. I actually prefer funerals to weddings.
Okay, tell me more.
2 reasons. One, the food is often better, and you don't have to bring a gift.
Okay. Okay. I'm making notes here because I'm going to come up with something out of all of that. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about your situation in lockdown, because I think that's something everybody in the world can relate to. Although I think in Canada we had a lot more lockdowns than a lot of other places. But I think this is just a great way to speak to being who you are. So I think, if you're, again, you have no problem sharing stories, Wayne, but just for purposes for the audience, if you're at a networking event or you're looking to put something in a newsletter, you could write this little story about, how did lockdowns affect you? There have been all sorts of crazy stories about, people's businesses that exploded, other people's, lives imploded because they couldn't stand being home with their partner 24 hours a day. One of the things that happened to me, and this would be Wayne, you speaking, is that I needed people. I'm extremely extroverted and I needed to talk to people. And so I set up my daughter's stuffies on the back of the couch so that I could have an audience and so that I could teach and talk. And one of the things that I help you do in your business is figure out what your strengths are. So a strength for me is definitely being with people, being in the front of the room. And my business coaching helps you figure out what your strengths are. And we build on those so that we're going to build your business to the next level. So that is just an example of how you can use a story from everyday life, things that happen. You know, as I said, we all went through the whole lockdown so that we can relate to that. And Wayne, I mean, you shared so many stories today. It was just an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. And I also appreciate so much you being my masked podcaster today.
Can we
We,
explain where that came from?
yeah,
In American television, there was this whole Masked Singer thing where the guy
yes.
did the song, and then at the end of the song, they revealed it. So if you didn't know what that metaphor was, that may have made no sense. But that was it. I said that if there wasn't going to be a lot of promotion, I could be the Masked Singer, and I could be in, you know. But that's where that came from.
Absolutely. And what we'll do is we'll do a little promotion after, and I'll link people to the YouTube clip. We'll use your headshot and we'll do a little bit of follow-up promo. But I do want to thank you for joining me, and thank you to the audience if you're tuning in live today or if you're watching this on replay. You know, stories are such a fun way to connect. As you can see through the conversation with Wayne today, he was full of stories. Stories create that real meaningful connection with your audience. There's science-backed data, there's like neuroscience that happens, how our brain triggers. But the most important thing you need to know is that stories build trust. So it allows you to be authentic. You don't have to worry about following those social media experts. You can connect your stories to purposeful messaging, and you suddenly have a marketing strategy. So whether it's online, on stage, or in front of somebody at a networking event, let story be your guide. You can reach out and learn more about how storytelling can help change your sales success. You can also download a free story bio that helps you dig into that power story brand that you have. I look forward to talking with you again next week. Thank you so much again, Wayne, for joining me. You can find Wayne at waynepratt.ca or find his book at freshlybrewedcoaching.com. Tell a story, change the conversation.